Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last panel, Dawn of Khorasan, Reclaiming and Reimagining the Future. I know some of the discussions have been a little heavy, emotional. We talked about the past, we talked about the challenges of the present. Now we're gonna dive into the future. So hopefully we can have a lighter conversation. My name is Khalid Bull. I'm Managing Director and co-founder of MALA, Muslim American Leadership Alliance. I would love to introduce our panelists. I'm gonna go in the order I was given. So I have Mr. Jason Guberman, the Executive Director of the American Sephardi Federation. We have Ambassador Sayyid Tayyib Jawad. He's the chairman of the American University of Afghanistan, AISS. And last but not least, I have Roya Hakakian, author, lecturer, and journalist.
A few others.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Please allow me to just give you an introduction about MALA. MALA is a nonprofit organization. We started as a storytelling organization in 2015, and our mission is to empower Muslim Americans and to amplify their voices while pursuing our own unique American dreams. We're involved in interfaith events and interfaith dialogue, and we aim to build bridges and foster a culture of understanding and respect rather than tolerance for other communities. And today's topic is about reimagining the future. And the reason why this is near and dear to us because we, about a few months ago, we started an initiative called Salam Home. It's to reimagine the future of Syrian Jews. And it makes me happy to see that there's other organizations that are working on reimagining the future of Jews that come from different places, such as Afghanistan. I would like to start with Mr. Jason. I know you had some remarks before I asked you the question. Thank you.
Not really prepared remarks, but just a few ideas. First off, I would like to thank the Dawood and the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies for this incredible conference. This really represents in bringing the hospitality and the mix of backgrounds, the best of Afghanistan, the once and future free Afghanistan, inshallah. I'm also honored to be here with the ambassador and Roya Jan. Roya, this summer was awarded the American Sephardi Federation's Pomegranate Award for Lifetime Achievement in Literature. Which is also a good opportunity for me to make mention that my former American Sephardi Federation board member and president of our partners, the Afghan Synagogue, Jack Abraham, talked about the importance of Mizrahi. There are differences of opinion on this, and I'll just mention it briefly because take a moment of privilege because we are a co-host of this conference, so lest anyone get the wrong impression why we're here. So when we say Sephardi, and when a lot of people say Sephardi, they think Spain and Portugal. But Sepharad is actually mentioned in the Tanakh, in Obadiah, and it's not defined. And the early commentators talked about Sepharad as being in Babylonia or being somewhere in Asia. I don't think anyone speculated that it was Khorasan, but this speaks to a geographic ambiguity about where it was, and it also speaks to the tradition that ASF harkens to, which originated with the Gaonim of Baghdad, which is tolerant and inclusive, what our president and original founder of the modern ASF over 50 years ago, Dr. Daniel Elazar, called a worldly and cosmopolitan yet seriously Jewish tradition. So that's why ASF is here. That's why we represent the Afghan Jewish community in the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations and the World Jewish Congress and other Jewish communal bodies. My last just framing of this is that when I first heard Khorasan, I, of course, as many people, the first thing that comes to mind, unfortunately, is ISIS-K, or the Islamic State. KP, Khorasan province. They are also looking to reclaim and reimagine what Khorasan was. They want to go back to the 8th century. Their frenemies, the Taliban, are well on their way of, unfortunately, reverting Afghanistan to that. But there's another Khorasan, and that is a little later, a little earlier, and also a little later. The Khorasan of Omar Khayyam, of Ibn Sina, of Al-Farabi, which was at a crossroads of the Silk Roads and of coexistence and of civilizations. I was a few months ago in Congress, and we had an event on the golden age of the Jews of Al-Andalus. And so I'll say exactly what I said there. When we talk about the golden age, we're implying that what came before and what came after was not so good. And similarly, when we talk about Khorasan, we can't have this idealized picture of it, but there certainly are people within that tradition and values that we should bring forward. And that's why I'm very excited to be on this panel and to have this idea. The king of Morocco once was asked about anti-Semitism, and he said that anti-Semitism is anachronistic. He saw it as a violation of even free expression, and he saw it as a reversion to a mythicized past. So I don't want us to go to the ISIS-K or Taliban mythicized past or some other mythicized past. I want us to take the best values of the past and build a better future.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'll get back to you in a bit.
Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, you have such a unique, interesting journey. You're born and raised in cosmopolitan Kabul, and I would love for the audience to hear a little bit about your story, but also privately we had a conversation about the positive and negative roles of interfaith versus intrafaith. I would also love for you to touch a little bit on that after we hear about your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With your permission, I'll use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's an honor, pleasure being here, and I thank my dear friend, Dr. David Radian, and also the Center for Jewish Civilization to allow us to get together and have some really interesting, serious, but informative discussion about various issues. And we heard a lot, actually, some very good academic work about the ancient history of not tolerance, of acceptance of each other. And you asked me about my childhood. Again, I'm fortunate to be of that generation of Afghans that have seen the good days of Afghanistan before the Soviets invasion. And that Kabul was very cosmopolitan. For me, going to Lycée Seflal, the French high school in Kabul, with Jewish classmates, it was normal, nothing unusual. Kids from different groups that were coming, including Afghan Jews kids that were our friends. And the synagogue in Gulfurushi, the Flower Street, was active. Jack Abraham knew a lot about that place, and so were the synagogues in Herat. And later on, actually, when I was in the government, we rebuilt actually the two synagogues of Herat beautifully with the really technical support of our fund foundation. They're magnificently restored. So that's the personal talking about a cosmopolitan city where not only tolerance but acceptance was normal. And this morning something was mentioned by Dr. Sharifi, I think, about the history of Afghanistan being interpreted as Pashtuns particularly, or Afghans being ancestors of Bani Israel. And that's true. When I first writing about actually the Afghan Jews, I purposefully was writing them in Farsi, because in our language, it's important for my people to understand more about their Jewish citizens and friends, instead of writing it in English, because there are much better actually resources in English available. And one of the articles I wrote is about how historically Afghans actually claim that they are one of the lost tribes or they are Bani Israel. And there's many important, actually, standard books of history. Like there's a famous book, it's called Persianate Tarikh Faranake, the Pashtuns in the light of history. It was the official book of history. There's another famous history book. It's called Tarikh Khorasan, which is bejeweled history. All of them claims that Afghans are actually descendants of Jewish tribe. In the big long argument, some fictional, some true, about how it happened and how they came to Afghanistan from Israel. But interestingly, for the first time during the monarchy, actually one Afghan intellectual educated in Turkey, Afandi, in one of the cabinet meetings introduced the idea that we are not Jewish, we are Aryan. And that had become the official line of the history writing of Afghanistan. And many books were produced arguing that Afghans are Aryans. And so again, it shows actually that the political events could impact the relation between people. But what is important for us now is to, as you indicated, we talked about the moments of collaboration, cooperation, coexistence, acceptance, but also we had also difficulties and times of crises like the one we have right now in Afghanistan. From the discussion that happened this morning about the kind of golden period and the times of crises, I conclude actually that all religions, especially Islam, tend to be more tolerant and accommodating when they are emerging and weak. And when they come in a position of strength, they do not accommodate. Contrary to this, governments, states are tolerant when they're strong, when they're in control, when they're stable, and they become intolerant when they're weak. An example being actually the Safavid in Iran, actually, that despite the golden history of tolerance, because they are facing internal crises, they start discrimination against not only Jews, but against even other Muslims and others as a way. So as a rule, it's very interesting. Religions are tolerant when they're weak, and states are tolerant when they're strong. So that's why we have seen these ups and downs in the history. And the reason that's the rule, but now the reason for the decline of this coexistence and cooperation and tolerance is that religion unfortunately gained more excessive role in politics and the later part of the history, and introduced actually minorities from a citizen into a second class citizen or another citizen at all. And that's why when we, again, if you look at the example of Islam in Medina, there's a famous document, it's called the Charter of Medina. That's like the most accommodating documents of Muslims to Jewish and other communities. But that was a time that Islam was emerging. Prophet Muhammad just moved to Medina and things were a little bit shaky. But once he returned to Makkah, the attitude changed. And one of the troublesome, and we have to be honest about our shortcoming too, and one of the troublesome issues is that Zimmi or Ali Dhimma, that people who are not actually Muslim have to pay special taxes and endure special restrictions. That came when religion was much stronger and in control. In Afghanistan, religion was weaponized when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Terms like jihad become glorified. When I was growing up in the high school in Afghanistan, I never heard of jihad. And if it was a jihad, was a personal thing. I didn't know that jihad means picking up weapons and killing someone that does not agree with you. So it became a glorified notion, jihad. And so, and later on, that also caused actually the life of many, many Afghans. So that's, and the same thing when you look in after 1979 in Iran, Jewish community which were successful, the Baha'is and others, they were marginalized. And it is a new political development there. And all of that lead to a collapse of the notion of citizenship in a country, that all citizens are equal and all people have the same right and equal access to opportunities in the government. Of course, if you look at the history, that was basically the rule. There are exceptions. There are exceptions of some good rulers that made exceptions. For example, in India, because we talked a lot about the Persian-speaking empire, but it's important also to extend a little bit to the Ottoman Empire and also to the India subcontinent to see like what was happening there at the same time. In India, under the Mughal, we have actually the concept of sulh-e-kul, the universal peace that allowed everyone to live, not only to live, to contribute to the court. Some of the Mughal ruler had like 4 wives purposefully, like one Christian, one Muslim, and one Hindu, and other. That's just, okay, it served their purpose too, but also it showed actually an equal opportunity. So that's, it is, sorry, okay. Oh, the concept of citizenship collapsed gradually. And that's why faith become politicized. And I mentioned about Afghanistan and Iran, but also in many other parts of our region, same thing happened. Fortunately, again, some of the friends are here from Central Asia, and I just came back from a conference in Samarkand. The Central Asian countries did better. And it was reassuring to hear actually in Samarkand that now Uzbekistan allow and register 18 different faiths. So some really ancient religions such as Judaism and their very synagogues to something as new as the Church of Latter-day Christ or Mormons. So that's a big change that's taking place there. Now, and then speaking of the neighborhood, also we should give credit to the Ottoman. They were the first that they created the notion of millet, the nation, where everybody was treated as equals. And codified. It's one thing is the decision of a ruler or the practice of one person, but they, for the first time, they codified the concept of millet. So now, a little bit about what we know actually, why we got actually from this glory into the situation that we are now. I just want to discuss briefly what should we do to get out of this, looking forward. I think there's a role for all of us to play. To be honest, ending political conflicts. Again, political conflicts are, by its nature, very difficult to avoid, but to the extent possible to depoliticize them. All the extremist element in all different faiths, they are mobilizing people and using political conflicts very effectively. Constitutionalizing the concept of citizenship, that's very, very important for any country. In adopting and improving some of the concept that works there in our part of the world, like Pancasila in Indonesia, like the millet concept in Turkey, and others. But I want to get to your question about, is there a role for interfaith in this dialogue? You would expect that I'll say yes, but let me push back and say no. Why not? Because in an interfaith dialogue, good follower, moderate follower of one faith to talk to the good and moderate follower of another faith. The problem is that we have lunatics down there. And so instead of interfaith, it's very important, or in addition to the interfaith, it's very important to have an intra-faith dialogue within our religion, using our own argument. It's the job of a Muslim clergy to condemn suicide bombing based on the teaching of Islam, and it's more effective if he can do it, if he will do it. Some of them are not doing it as effectively as they should, and it's equally important and it's what's happening actually right now in the Middle East is for the clear voice of the Jewish community to condemn actually what's happening. That's more effective, because otherwise it will be disregarded as, oh yeah, that's someone from outside. So it's very important to have a more serious intra-faith dialogue, because there are so many different readings of the religion, and that allow actually many people to misuse that. And to recover a more kind of inclusive interpretation. As I mentioned, religion do tend to define justice and salvation for their own follower. But there is also always common ground among religions on justice, on equality, on compassion, on dignity, on love, and others. So, and it's equally important for the academia and institutions to get together, like what you are doing here, to provide a platform for exchanges of ideas, to talk about our common grounds and also our differences equally, like the forum before, right? It's good to have this kind of exchange. And here also engaging the diaspora. It's very important because they live in a more open society. Like a good example is like Jack Abraham in the Afghan Jewish community in Brooklyn. So some of these guys come from 3 different nations between them and their father and grandfather. It's an example of how cosmopolitan we are, how connected we are, and they played an important role. And again, and the last point, emphasizing collaboration, what we do together, talk about it. Maybe when Afghan children from Peshawar and Islamabad are airlifted to Israel for heart surgery, that's a good thing. We should talk about that. We are saving the life of a person. And Jack and I, Jack did most of the work, but I just provided some small assistance. And when Afghan judges and attorneys were airlifted from Afghanistan when they were constructed, and I was ambassador in Moscow, we worked together with Israel to fund the airlift, to save actually Afghan judges, sportsmen, men and women, both. It's a large group of people. And it's important to emphasize that. It's important to talk about this, what's happening on the operational level, on the ground level. And it's honest operations. So when October 7 attack happened, I sent actually a message to Yotam Pulitzer, the head of Israel, and I said, I feel your pain because I am associated with the American University of Afghanistan. My campus was attacked. My students were killed inside the campus. So I feel your pain. And then later on, he asked me to publish this message in a book that was published. I said, fine, this is what I meant. I mean, and this is part of a book that later on was published in Israel. So anyhow, to conclude, we have a lot more in common than what divides. And I will end with a Rumi quote, which we have. We'll celebrate it more tonight. It says, "The lamps are different, but the light is the same." So if we fixate and stare in one lamp, we lose our sight. So let's celebrate our diversity, not actually tolerate our diversity. Thank you very much.
Ms. Royal, you're Iranian American, born in Iran, moved to the US as a refugee.
Yes.
And some of your work touches on identity and belonging. I've seen some of your poetry. And we talked about how identity has been evolving, the concept of it, decades ago, today, and the direction it's heading towards. I would love for you to talk to us about identity and the evolution of identity and the future of identity for Iranian Americans and Persians in general.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I feel like we came out of a, heavy metal concert. and we are the panel that's providing elevator music. So, because we are forecasting a future that's incredibly difficult to imagine at a moment when there is hardly anything good to point to about the condition of Jews in the places that they used to live. In the particular case of this panel, Afghanistan, Iran, their numbers are fast dwindling. So it's we're asked to basically create a fantasy world that doesn't exist at the moment, but in some ways it's not very hard to imagine, because if there can be a kosher restaurant in the United Arab Emirates today, and if there can be 110,000 Jews in Germany today, then it means that in places where we didn't see Jews before, or never thought there could be Jews there again, such a future can possibly exist. I can't, I'm afraid, say very much about identity. I'm not very fond of discussions about identity. But what I think is worth engaging in when it comes to this particular conversation about the future is to see where were points of, moments of a golden era, so to speak, for Jews in that region, what lessons we can draw from that golden era. And when we retrospectively look at that era, what are our criticisms or generally our assessment of that era? When it comes to Iran, I think that golden era may well be the 1960s and 1970s in Iran for the Iranian Jewish community. The reasons are very clear. Jews moved out of the ghettos to which they were limited throughout Iran. They were given infinite opportunities when Jews didn't have them. They were able to reside wherever they wanted to, take up professions in whatever fields they wanted to. And in that way, to go back to Ambassador Jawad's comment, they were treated as real equal citizens. And so it's very important, I think, in looking back at this period to remember that there is no Jewish welfare or Jewish good living without the general standards of a society and the definitions of a society's citizenship and belonging having been elevated. So if Jews were doing so much better in Iran in those 2 decades, it was because there was a concerted effort behind the idea of building a nation of equals within Iran. And in the process of creating a nation of equals, giving more rights to women, giving equal rights to so many other members of ethnic and religious minorities, made the general conditions possible for Jews to also benefit. What I'm trying to say in a way is to do the reverse of what Bishop Niemöller had said. Bishop Niemöller said, first they came for the Jews. Now I'm saying, if they first build a better society, if they first build a society where all citizens are treated as equals, where there is a focus on giving equal rights to 50% of that society, namely women, then you can guarantee that the Jews will do well too. So the formula works in reverse just as well. But in looking back at these 2 incredibly remarkable decades for the life of Iranian Jews, there are ways in which we can reflect and say, so what didn't work? What if we could make it better? What would we make better? And I guess the 2 best criticisms that I can offer, or assessments that I can offer, can be captured in 2 little anecdotes. And I first will lay out the anecdotes for you, and then we can kind of draw in a fashion of the Aesop fable what the lessons of these anecdotes might be. The first one is a short one, is very simple. Once upon a time, a very, very dear friend of mine, who I love and have been friends with for decades, who's not Jewish, who's Iranian, was trying to speak about how great and wonderful their Jewish neighbors who lived across the street in Iran were. And he said, we had such excellent Jewish neighbors in Iran. They were such great Iranians you could have never said they were Jews. That's anecdote number one. Anecdote number two takes a little longer to explain what it's worth your time. It begins with the memoir of an Iranian industrialist named Parviz Nazarian, who later went to Israel, built a bunch of roads and things in Israel, went back to Iran, built a number of major highways, bridges, and just major infrastructure for Iran. Then, at the dawn of 1979, left Iran, went to Los Angeles, and created the communications giant named Qualcomm. And at some point, he wanted to write his memoirs, and somebody called me up and said, "Can you help him?" And so I sat beside him and listened to his stories for days and days. And this is the anecdote that I want to tell you from the memoirs that I helped him draft, which is this. So he lived in Mahalle, and Mahalle was a ghetto, a Jewish ghetto in Iran, when there were such things in Tehran as ghettos. It was in the south of Tehran, and it was a distinctly poor and Jewish neighborhood that nobody really wanted to associate even Jews themselves with. So Parviz Nazarian, who became a tycoon later on, lived in that ghetto. His father had died, and when he was 9 or 10 years old, he had to try to support his mother and little brother in whatever way he could. And it was in the 1940s, and some neighbors said to him that the best place where you can find a job is the railroad, and why you should work for the national train or railroad system. It was because a group of Iranian Marxists were running the railroad, and those guys really, really cared about poor people and wanted to lift them up. So send your son to the head of, or the supervisor of the railroad system, and they will hire him, and they will, send him around to sell cigarettes or whatever, and he will make a little bit of money, pocket money, and everybody, he'll be happy, and he'll support his family. So the Marxists, the Tudeh party members, this is the Iranian Communist Party, who hired this little boy at the time, ask him what he is, what his name is, and where he comes from, and he says that he's Jewish and he lives in Mahalle, and the communist fellow who's hiring him says, "There is no Jew or Muslim among us. We're all comrades." And so from now on, you will be Comrade Parviz, and you will work for us, and you will sell cigarettes. And Comrade Parviz goes to work. And he goes up and down, whatever the path of the railroad was, and wherever he gets off, there is a Tudeh party or Communist Party central office where he goes in and out of, and he realizes that in one of them, there are 3 busts sitting on the desk of this central office comrades unit, and he asks who those 3 busts belong to, and he says, well, this is Karl Marx, and this is Friedrich Engels, and this is Vladimir Lenin, and he brags about how he's the only one who has these 3 busts, and nobody else up and down the railway can brag about the same thing, and everybody wants these busts, but nobody has them. So, Comrade Parviz, who obviously, as you can imagine, is going to be thinking a lot about how to make a much better living than he was making by just selling cigarettes, returns home and talks to a neighbor who is a builder. And he says, "How much would it cost to give me a cast of 3 busts, Engels, Marx, and Lenin, and how many of these busts can you make in a span of, in a span of 2 weeks?" And lo and behold, Comrade Parviz begins to, instead of selling cigarettes, begins to sell busts of these three venerable Marxist leaders, and he makes a lot more money selling them than he did selling cigarettes. Now, the reason I wanted to put these two anecdotes next to each other is because in both of these cases, whether it was the case of my dear friend describing his neighbors as being the perfect Iranians whose Jewishness was undetectable, or whether it's in the case of Conrad Parviz, who's told that whether he's Jewish or Muslim, it doesn't matter, they're all comrades. There is one thing in common, and that's the emphasis of making Jews indistinct. And if there is one thing I can point to about what didn't work about the existence of Iranian Jews within the Iranian society, and it continues to go wrong, it's this emphasis on making Jews indistinct in order to prove loyalty to the broader cause of Iranianness. Or in the case of Comrade Parviz, the broader cause of Marxistness. So what I am saying in forecasting a better future for us is, again, precisely what Ambassador Jawad referred to as being inclusive, but not at the cost of erasing distinction. We have yet to learn how to be inclusive and allow distinctness to exist. That will be our challenge. That is our challenge. It has been our challenge in the past. It is our challenge now as we live in diaspora. It will be our challenge in the future. And I want to emphasize that 2 points really, that the more we work towards the cause of democracy and greater rights, individual rights, the closer we get to the cause of fighting anti-Semitism or making the lives of Jews better wherever they may choose to live in the world. And the second thing, for those societies who want to include their Jews or whatever other minorities, is to somehow learn the art of inclusion and distinctiveness at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jason, as I promised, I'm gonna get back to you now. So you've been involved in a really extraordinary project called Diarna, huge fan. Diarna, just so everybody knows, is a digital platform that locates Jewish sites, specifically in the Middle East and North Africa. They document the stories behind them. They take pictures and the virtual tours. This way, other historians, Jews, or whoever is interested in this type of work can take a look at them without having to go visit that area because of some complexities. So far, you guys have been you have preserved about I checked this morning. It was 2,811 sites. I'm interested in knowing if you guys have any plans or conversations to physically restore these sites with any of the nations that they're located in.
So Diarna began with this idea that we wouldn't be able to physically restore them. That sites were decaying or being destroyed. This was 5, 6, 7 decades after these Jewish communities had been displaced. So really the idea was to put these sites on the map with as much multimedia as possible, ranging from oral history interviews to photographs, even 3D digital reconstructions. There have been opportunities in different places, like in Morocco or in Egypt, where there was interest in restoring sites, and some sites have actually been restored. But for the vast majority of sites, there are no Jewish communities. It doesn't really make sense, even if it was possible. And then on the other hand, as we have started doing this, you had ISIS in Iraq destroying Jewish and Muslim heritage. So no, I don't think it's going to be possible for the vast majority of places to to restore physical sites, but that makes the memories of these sites all the more important in creating virtual entry points. One of the sites I would love to mention for a number of reasons is in Hamadan, Iran, and it's the purported shrine to Esther and Mordecai. I should say purported. We don't take a position on the veracity of religious claims. One time I was speaking to the Iraqi synagogue in Queens, the B'nai Naharaim, and they said, "Do you have the tomb of Daniel in Kirkuk?" And I said, "Yes, but we also have the tomb of Daniel in Shush. So you have to fight it out with the Persians to determine which one is." Yeah, there's a few of them. There's also everyone has a tunnel to Israel. In Yemen and Iran, people have these different pathways near the shrine of Sarah Bat Ashir in Iran, in Isfahan. But the Hamadan shrine I love for a number of different reasons. First off, when we wrote about the site, we invoked Shahin Shirazi, particularly his epic on Adir Shir Nama, the retelling of the Book of Esther. And it's really beautiful, beautiful language. And there's a scene where Higai, who's the king's Zoroastrian chief of staff, priest, sees that he's down and comes in and says, like a lion, he came to serve him and wanted to find him a special someone. And the special someone was Esther. Of course, Esther was shrouded, not only secret, but a double secret. And similarly, the shrine is a double secret because this shrine exists, but it's not terribly well known outside of the Jewish community. And even within the Jewish community, they don't really know the history of the restoration. So in the early 1970s, in honor of 2,500 years of Persian monarchy, every confession in Iran gave a gift to the Shah. The Jewish community's gift was to restore the shrine. And there was some sort of competition, and a young architect who had been educated in France and was already doing some major projects in Iran, and named Yassi Gabai, he won the competition. And so he restored and renovated the shrine and built a subterranean synagogue as part of the shrine complex. He made it accessible from the street. He put up this beautiful gate and took some amazing pictures, which I'll get back to in a second. Yassi was not just a Jewish architect, he was a great architect and had really invested and put his heart into this project. Atop the subterranean synagogue is a Jewish star, which is visible from space. So when Tablet Magazine wrote about this, they said that it may be the only site visible, Jewish star visible from space. When the regime took over after the Khorasan Revolution, they actually removed the fence that Yassi had put around the site, presumably because it had a 6-point star. But Yassi pointed out that this star, of course, is in Islamic architecture, in Zoroastrian architecture, and he had put it there as a direct homage to a mosque ceramic and the idea of this commonality of all Persians, all the different confessions. So they removed that. They didn't destroy the subterranean synagogue. They did destroy another Jewish star was found in Iran when Google Earth started to get popular, and it was atop one of the buildings at the Tehran airport, presumably left there by some of the Israeli engineers who built much infrastructure in Iran. But today, if you go to the shrine, the regime does not mention Yassi at all. They mention the renovation that had happened many years ago by the Mongols, which, if you're familiar with Mongol restoration techniques, they burned Hamadan to the ground. And then they say about their own, but their own has actually been to remove the distinctiveness of the shrine. And the shrine has also been politicized. That it had its status as a heritage site downgraded. There have been protests and threats. The Basij militia threatened it, and there was actually a fire inside the subterranean synagogue.
Thank you, Jason. All right, we're ready for some questions.
My question is from Ambassador Javad or Ms. Afakian. Unfortunately, by nature, I'm an idealist, and I say this from my heart. Many times when I talk to my friends, I said I yearn for the return of the golden age of Islam. Do you think that's a reality? With all of the things that's going on, is it possible? Because I think, as we have seen throughout the history, poetry, science, astronomy, and all that. So, and I know I studied somewhere that the architect of the city of Baghdad were two Iranian, one a Zoroastrian and one a Jew, Salah and the Pope. Why not again? That's my question. Your comments.
It's possible to have a return of a golden era in the region or the areas that you're talking about, but that will be independent from the religious identity, I think. That as much as the culture and the history that existed in that part of the world was adopted Islam or Islam adopted them, but it was independent from the faith. So definitely the people are the same. The capabilities are there. I hope that will return, but I don't see that will return as an faith identity in that part of the world.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So also, thank you. I have also a question that refers to the ambassador and Rayota. I'm wondering, first of all, Ambassador, I'm sorry for disagreeing with you.
No.
But the millet system actually led to the ghettoization and to the reinforcement of religious identity. So that, because one of the things that you have to mention, keep in mind, is that in the bygone ages, there was no, they didn't make a difference. I mean, Jewish populations were writing under Achaemenids, right? But I wonder how do you see the connection between what I call ghettoization and what Roya calls as deleting identity, kind of, because deleting identity might be two-way as well, right?
Who wants to answer?
Go ahead.
Okay. I purposely don't use the term identity because it's the source of all evil, at least lately. But I think, okay, so here's, I'm working on a big project about the American Revolution. And in the process of researching this story that I'm working on, I learned something incredibly fabulous, which I hope you find very interesting, or as interesting as I did. And if you don't, please don't tell me. But it's this. So in 1788, when the American Constitution is ratified, there are huge celebrations that break out throughout the colonies, or the former colonies. And one of these huge celebrations happens in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1788. Thousands and thousands of Americans, or these brand new liberated Americans, come to the streets to celebrate their new constitution. And the city has paid for a giant feast for the whole, everybody who's out. So there are tables laden with food and something else. There's another table next to this giant table full of food, is a table of kosher food. Now, I don't know if you're blown away by this as much as I was when I learned, but it was in the first time in the history of the world since the fall of the temple in Jerusalem, when Jews had been included in such an open fashion in a civic celebration, right? Now, I don't observe kosher dietary laws, but I almost wept when I read this, because this wasn't a measure of how good the Jews had it. It was, in a very small way. But in a larger way, it was a measure of how serious these Americans were about their democratic ideals and ideals of inclusivity. And that's what I love about this story. So yes, we can get into trouble, as we in America did, if we emphasize identity to death. But at the same time, when you include and you allow this celebration of differences as part of the larger whole, then I think you're exercising democracy as at its best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Ambassador,
Yeah, just one quick, again, as far as Afghanistan, the modern Afghanistan Kabul, the Jews did not live in a ghetto. They live in Kuchigul Furushi, which is the flower street, it's like the Georgetown of Kabul. It's one of the best. And even the term mahalla in Central Asia, in Afghanistan, has a completely different meaning. Mahalla in Mazar Sharif and Bukhara and Samarkand means the local community. That's where people get together. It's an institution, it's not a place. Thank you.
I will take two more questions before Professor Ori gives us the concluding remarks. So I think you wanted to. Sorry, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I have a quick question from Ambassador Jawad and one from Mr. Jason. Ambassador Jawad, you talked about the unity of the religions, and you said that the religions were not this much against each other before. Do you think that particularly in the last 100 and few years, it was because there was an external enemy, Marxism was, for example, against all the religions, and that was why they came together? And do you think that like atheism and nihilism, which is growing up, particularly in Europe, if you see, these might cause another unity of the religions? Do you think that would be one of the possibilities? And Mr. Jason, I read somewhere that we have some 40,000 Jews in Afghanistan and in different parts of the country. When I was traveling to the provinces, I asked some of the elders what they were doing, the Afghan Jews, and what they were talking and what they were saying. And most of them say that they were talking about the trade, about the export, about the businesses, entrepreneurship, and about these all life values. Since you say that those areas are not reconstructible physically, do you think that you may campaign to revitalize the values that the Afghan Jews stand for, and now they are all disappeared? Thanks.
Who wants to go first?
I'll be quick. Very good question. Yes. Unity could be actually forged when there's a common threat, a common enemy. That's a tactical measure. That's not real unity. And it will go away when the threat is gone. So if there is a unity, it should be based on our shared values. And if you don't have shared values, it doesn't matter. It should be based on celebrating our differences, if there is a unity. So we should unite on positive note. But if you unite on another threat of atheism and other, as it was the case of Marxism during the late 19th century, then it will be temporary. That will be tactical. Thank you.
So I'm going to answer your question, if you permit me, with a story. So Herschel, who's going to be speaking later tonight at the Rumi event, is going to go into more detail about this. But a couple years ago, I got a call from him, and he was interested in hosting a private conference in New York to discuss this, or not quite this, but what this represents. This is a replica of the Afghan liturgical choir, which is the oldest Jewish book in book form. This had been discovered in the mid-90s in a Buddhist cave by Hazara persecuted Muslims in Afghanistan. No, it's a replica.
Okay.
Not the real one. Don't worry. It's a very good replica, but it's not. No. The real one is very safe and secure. It had been found by Muslims in a Buddhist cave. Herschel is a researcher at the Museum of the Bible. It had been acquired by a Christian and donated to the museum. And now he's calling the Jews, representing the Afghan Jewish community, to get back involved in this project. When we did the exhibit called Sacred Words at the museum, Zainab Khan, who's from Mala, a good friend, came and was in tears about what this represented and how this book represents the best values of Afghanistan, also the Jewish Afghan values. And we ended up doing an event, the first interfaith Muslim, Jewish, Christian event at the Museum of the Bible, and have continued to work together. And tonight is another fruit of that collaboration. So I think the work that ASF and Mala have done, and we've written about this in Newsweek and in the Allgemeiner about our years of partnership, and which has been tested. And after October 7th, there was no difference before or after with our relationship, because it was based on those core values. Similarly, when we've had our in June, when we honored Roya, it was as part of our New York Sephardic Jewish Film Festival and overall this festival Sepharad. We had Mala and Mimuna Association, a Moroccan Muslim, so two Muslim organizations co-sponsoring a Jewish festival in New York. So this is, I think, the way forward is to build on these shared values. And I highly recommend the article that I co-wrote with Zainab, because it really talks about what this means for America.
So why our Muslim-Jewish relationship works.
Yes.
And you can read it. It was written before October 7th, and you can read it after October 7th in the same context. The litmus test of hate, has just kind of changed flavors and forms over the years, but it remains, very embedded. And now with political rhetoric, it, gets covered up, but it exists, and it's up to us, just as the ambassador had said, intra-faith, for us to look at those holes and gaps in our community and call those out in order to move forward to the dawn.
I'm gonna take one last question.
I have the following statement. Personally, I was involved with. In terms of having harmony, Muslim harmony, and again expanding its all fields, trade, art, and everything. But I think the fundamentalists took over. I'm going to give you two samples. I was in kibbutz Be'eri when I was 12 years old. The kibbutz, 105 people working. There's a lady there sitting with Arafat, and he's got his hand laterally around. I have a picture. She was taking kids from Gaza to the Israeli hospitals for treatment. Hamas came in for 30 days. They thought that she was a hostage. They had inserted burned her to death. From a small piece of charcoal, DNA, they realized that she was dead. If she's killed, and she does all that stuff for the kids who are not politically involved in any way, what's going to happen? Another example, I have a friend of mine, a Persian guy, Suleiman Zadeh. He was in charge of the electric grid in Tehran. When the Khomeini came in back and forth, one group was saying, switch it off, one guy said no. It's gone. His neighbor comes to him, he said, don't worry, when they come, look at the mentality of religion when you get into something that comes to him and said, don't worry, if they come after you, I'm going to kill you myself so you don't suffer. As long as we have this kind of mentality in any religion, the value that we have, the potential of cooperation and growing in every field is not going to exist. Okay? And I want to ask something else also. The king of Afghanistan, he was thrown out by his brother-in-law, who was also his cousin. He had agreement with the Shah of Iran that from this mountain full of iron, they're going to build the railroad going into Khorasan. Afghanistan will have control over it and do it. What happened, Khomeini came in, it gives the Russian backdoor to go to Afghanistan, and because of that, the whole neighborhood gone. Again, fundamentalism. We have to find a way how to solve that, to go forward in the society, God bless.